Parliament. I wanted to start by sharing our own condolences and prayers for the families of Christina, Mishana, McFarlane, Mikhail, O'Shane, and so many of our children who have had to face tragic circumstances. In particular, the death of Christina, of the McFarlanes, along with their grandmother, really is an incident that has touched the hearts of many Jamaican parents and individuals. The truth, though, is that although these incidents were direct incidents, every instance of crime and violence and murder in our communities is a traumatic event for our children. And I believe that we need to do much more than is currently being done in terms of the psychosocial support to the families and the communities. I know that we have been doing fairly well in terms of the personal instances and the individual counseling and so on. But I think sometimes we forget that our children are in a community where these incidents also happen. And we have not been doing well in terms of the broader support for the community and for children who find themselves in those circumstances. And so, Minister, along with the other ministries that would form part of that, I wanted to make that recommendation. I also wanted to, as much as we laud, and we were all pleased to hear the report from Montefiore in terms of how well Michael Allen was doing. And we are extremely pleased to see the work and the kind of initiative taken by the healthcare workers from Montefiore. I also wanted to add words of congratulations to our local healthcare professionals, both from St. Anne's Bay Hospital and Bustamante Children's Hospital. I think sometimes we forget that we do have such dedicated members locally who go really beyond the call to really save our children, save us as a country, and I wanted to place that on record. Chris says I'm getting the new health center now. Okay, I like that. I also wanted to say how pleased I was to see the establishment of the helplines, Minister, across the island. I think that that is important. I note your concern in terms of individuals taking it up and individuals and parents and families actually using it. And I wanted maybe a word with Minister Tufton about the kind of aggressive public education around Jamaica Moves could be something that is replicated around the use of the helplines for our children. I find that when we have these helplines and these projects that are important tools that need to be used, sometimes we really have to have an aggressive public education program that actually gets our children to use it. I know that Minister Grange would know just how difficult sometimes it is to just make sure that everyone knows that these helplines are available. You would be surprised whether it is through the local government authorities, for example, just to make sure that we send out the information to everyone who is in this space, who is dealing with our children, who is dealing with our communities, SDC, the local authorities, the MPs, the councillors, I believe, and on TV, I believe that we need to really ramp up the public education around the potential and the impact that using these helplines, the difference that they could make. Minister, in terms of the missing children's report, I am pleased to see that the number of children reported missing between January and June of 2020 represents a 37% reduction when compared to last year. Still saddened that the majority are still girls, 80%, compared to 20%. And I also noted that you indicated that the pandemic may have resulted, because kids are at home, and I think more under supervision than when they are going to and fro and so on, may have helped. I believe, however, that we still need to identify what are the mitigating factors and to make sure that persons are aware. I remember several years ago when there was a study that came out that indicated that children who were engaged, for example, in extracurricular activities, in particular those who were involved in uniformed activities, tended to not be among those who went missing. When parents knew the friends of their children, that those children were less likely to go missing. I believe we need to identify these factors and promote them. Promote them in our schools, in our churches, our PTAs, and so on, so that parents are aware of the circumstances that make their children less vulnerable. I think that is important, so that the trend can continue and we can get it to where we want it to be. In terms, Minister, of the collaboration with Microsoft, I am extremely pleased as well to see the collaboration and what that is yielding in terms of the 500,000 Microsoft Office 365 education software licenses. And I agree that this goes a long way in terms of closing the digital divide. Of course, you will agree with me that we still have the challenge in terms of the gap, in terms of devices and stable and effective connectivity. To ensure that our children can make the most of that those still remain a challenge. I know that we have started the Own Your Own Device, Minister. I noted that there has been some reports, I'd love for you to hear your response to that. There has been some reports that we didn't get off as we had intended on the day of the launch. And parents have asked me whether or not there could be a makeup in terms of the deadline on which it closes. So kind of just make up for not starting as we had suggested. I believe the school transportation is also a good idea. We have been talking about school transport idea. We have been talking about it in education and in our communities, and even government for quite some time. And I do believe that especially now as we face the face-to-face in school, and as we acknowledge that taking transportation, public transportation to school is an added risk in a time when the numbers are still not where we would want them to be in terms of the spread of COVID-19. I am not sure if I saw it, but I'm hoping, Minister, because one of the things that schools, parents, and children always say to us is to remember that in terms of the school transportation system, the greatest need is quite possibly in our rural areas. And that sometimes we tend to think of Kingston as Jamaica and not to place the emphasis that is deserved on our rural areas. Minister, you ended by talking about the journey that we have embarked to close the digital divide and to leapfrog our children and our education sector into the digital age. As I think I said last time, it would be helpful if we could get a kind of broader vision as to what that journey is, especially because as we are operating now, there are still some significant gaps that makes some of us nervous. I know that some persons just jump on the bus and they're okay as they pass and they say a good senior, they say, yeah, we're doing good. But there are some individuals who would like to know what that journey looks like, where are the twists and turns in the journey and how we are going to do that so we can fully appreciate the entire journey. And I wanted to commend that to you. Thanks, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Member. Statement by Minister continues. Minister Grange.
Madam Speaker, I thought my colleague did ask the Minister some questions, so, and she's expecting to get an answer.
Oh, my apologies.
Yes,
we made a change of speakers during the presentation of the member. My apologies. Minister?
Sure. Thank you. I'd like to thank the member for points raised, in particular the emphasis that we should have on public education regarding the helplines. Of course, I would love a program akin to Jamaica Moves, because that would definitely get the word out there, so that there is awareness that there is help and parents do not have to face things alone. There are professionals who can help them through different situations. I agree with you that on the technology side, that we still have a gap in terms of devices and connectivity. And I know that the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology and the government in general has embarked on a very ambitious program. It's in the early days, but there is every intent and we have the vision to close this gap in terms of connectivity. With regards to the own your own device and a possible extension of the deadline, not yet at this moment. We're seeing a good take-up of the system, and because we have a limit as to how much we can provide, we're watching the take-up. If there is a need to, we will, but at this time we haven't decided to extend the December 4th date. And with regards to school transportation, I agree with you that the greatest need is in the rural areas, and that's why you would see outlined in the statement what the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information is currently doing for schools in the rural area. There can be more. I'm sure there's more to be done, but at least we have begun. We've recognized the problem and taken steps to help parents and students in the rural area. As to the broader vision about the journey that we're on, over time, it will become clear because I've been articulating what that journey is, how it starts, and it is this vision that we've had for some time for Jamaica to become a first world country by 2030. As we journey towards that date, there are certain skills or skill sets that we will need our population to have, and they need to be more skilled from a technology perspective. But we can't just say that. We have to take the actions. And the actions look like they are the ones that we're taking now in terms of enabling our students with the devices so that they can have access to the online world, enabling the connectivity so wherever persons are, wherever students are in Jamaica, they can be connected, ensuring that there is affordability of the plans that exist. And in cases, you will see that the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information has stepped in to ensure that we pay the expense of the student and the teachers getting onto the learning management system, and we don't burden parents with that cost. Additionally, you will see us roll out a device management system to ensure that we help our students to manage the device. We will also be rolling out educational platforms, educational software. Some exist already, but we're going to put the kind of communication plan behind it so that the students become way more aware of what's available to them. We will be rolling out programs that can help the students with their reading, with their comprehension, but it begins with the child having a device and a connectivity. All of what I'm saying will not be possible unless the child has a device and there's connectivity. And so over time, we will articulate in greater detail exactly where we are on the journey, so that we can have all of Jamaica along with us as well in terms of their understanding of what it means to enable a society to become technologically skilled and to be able to manage in the 21st century. As a result of what we're doing, in a few short years, you are going to see a proliferation of digital services out of our banking sector, out of a lot of our industries, when they realize that the depth of skill of the population has significantly improved. So while the emphasis today is on the devices, it's not about the devices. The devices are the learning tool, but we have to deliver those to the students, or else we won't be able to do all the other things that we have planned. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Grange. Okay, we still have enough.
Speaker, I did indicate that I have a question to ask. Minister, in relation to the commendable gift from Microsoft, I'd just like to understand whether or not this is an offset to the price that we normally would pay Microsoft. I'm aware that the government has been in a contractual relationship with Microsoft, and every year there is a fee that is paid. Is this going to be an offset? Is this a new facility? And perhaps you could remind us of the annual fee that we pay to Microsoft for the various software that the government uses. And finally, if you could also indicate when will the parents be notified as to who would have been successful in the allocations of the tablets.
Thank you. With regards to Microsoft, as you are well aware, Microsoft products are used across government, and so I would not have the aggregated number to present here, but the government does have a strong relationship with Microsoft. I got to know Microsoft more in depth from my days at the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, and learned about all that they have to offer in the education space because of our relationship with the Ministry of Education through e-learning. And so when I came to the ministry, it was quite easy to begin the implementation of that. It is not an offset, it's it's a contribution to the education sector. And you must be aware that when we launched the online teaching approach, we went public with the Google Suite Learning Management System. And so you can imagine the competition that exists now between those two global players to be here in Jamaica and to provide for our education sector. So I hope that answers your question. And I forgot the other one. What was the other one? When will the parents be notified? The closing date, as I said, is December 4th. We're seeing good take-up, but shortly after, because we have to do, our spot verification, even though the system is verifying as we go along, but we've got to look at the data in totality to ensure that there are no anomalies, and then shortly thereafter they'd be able to go to the vendors to be able to make the purchase.
Minister Grange.
Madam Speaker, Yesterday, we got up to the very sad news of the horrific killing of a grandmother and her 2 granddaughters in Trial Heights in Spanish Town, St. Catherine. As a St. Catherine Member of Parliament, as a minister, as a mother, as a grandmother, as a woman, as a citizen of Jamaica, I feel the pain of this vile act to my core. Madam Speaker, there can be no excuse for this wickedness. We condemn it in the strongest sense. We commiserate with and send our condolences to the family. And we urge the community, anyone with information, please say something and let us have justice for Iselin McFarlane, for Christina McFarlane, and Michelle McFarlane. The incident took place in a neighboring constituency, not in my constituency, but I feel the pain. I've asked the Bureau of Gender Affairs to visit the community and to work with other public and private sector entities to provide support to the members of the family and to the community at large. Madam Speaker, this House has joined me several times in the past in condemning violent acts against our women and our children. And in the last Parliament, we tabled the report of the Joint Select Committee that reviewed the Sexual Offences Act, the Offences Against the Person Act, the Domestic Violence Act, and the Child Care and Protection Act. This crime highlights the need for us to move quickly along the process, move the process quickly along towards implementing the recommendations and amending the laws to give greater protection to our people, which will serve as deterrence and to eliminate the violence. Madam Speaker, as fate would have it, tomorrow we join the rest of the world in commemorating the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls, and the 16 days of activism towards ending the violence. I was in church on Sunday launching our observance. It is the kind of violence, Madam Speaker and colleague members of Parliament, the kind of violence that was perpetrated against Miss Icy and her granddaughters, that we all must commit ourselves to doing whatever is humanly possible to end it. As a country, we feel distress and we sometimes despair when we hear of these brutal acts of violence. But we mustn't retreat and we must not surrender. And we cannot give in to the gunmen. This is when we must fight back stronger than ever. Fight back to the point where they have to retreat and not us. We cannot surrender Jamaica, Madam Speaker. And we must develop a steel-like determination that we will end the violence, knowing that it takes all of us to end the violence. Every single member of Parliament here must commit himself and herself to go into your constituency and condemn this act and any such act, and to let them know we are not going to surrender, we are not going to retreat, and we're going to see that this violence ends. It can end. It must end, and it will end. We must renew, Madam Speaker, our commitment to ending domestic abuse as well. We must commit to stop using violence as a way to discipline our children. It's time we decide as a nation that we will stop beating our picnic. We must end all acts of violence and abuse in our homes, in our communities, and in our country. We have to focus on the homes and the communities because most of the violence against women and girls and our boys takes place in the homes. We know as well that the violence is prevalent. A UN report on the violent life events that many women experience estimated that overall 35% of women worldwide have experienced either physical and or sexual violence. This is in keeping with the findings of the local Women's Health Survey, which found that 1 in every 4 women in Jamaica has been slapped, beaten, thumped up with fists, pushed, kicked, attacked with a weapon, or threatened with a weapon by her male partner. We also know that the violence doesn't have to happen. It is not inevitable. Madam Speaker, we have seen a significant decline in violence against women in some countries. For example, in the United States, domestic violence against adult women went down by 64% between 1993 and 2010. How did they do it? By implementing a number of measures, which we have also adopted into our 10-year National Strategic Action Plan to end gender-based violence. Among the actions is the development of a network of shelters for women who need help to leave abusive relationships. And Madam Speaker, I've spoken many times about the government's commitment to establish the national shelters, and we have been working hard to get this done. With the budgetary support of the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, we have purchased 3 properties to be transformed into national shelters. And the first property, Madam Speaker, after significant refurbishing and reconstruction, has been transformed into a safe and comfortable facility to house women who are victims of abuse and their children. We are now open and ready to take our women in who are being abused. The facility will accept clients even while we continue to receive donations to make it more comfortable and build out our programs to help women to rebuild their lives and get back on their feet. I use this opportunity, Madam Speaker, to read out the 24-hour hotline numbers for women who need the shelter. 876-553-0372 or 876-929-2997. And I read these numbers because I get the calls. I get the calls directly on my cellular phone. And so the more I can promote the numbers where they can call directly and get expert advice and assistance, I do so today. The other 2 properties are now in early reconstruction and or refurbishing stages and will be transformed quickly into safe spaces for women. One is in the east of the island and one is in the western end of the island. So, Madam Speaker, I wish to commend the countless women, the organizations and churches who have over the years provided refuge for women and children in their time of need. I want to thank them all for their continued work to save and improve lives. We know that several women stay in abusive relationships because they are financially dependent on the man. That is why we have made women's economic independence, which is a special program we have now introduced, as a priority program. Many women say, boy, I can't leave because I don't have nowhere to go, or I don't have no work, or I don't have no money, so I have to stay with him. So we are making efforts to change that. Through this program, we want to equip the women with the skills and other resources to run successful businesses and to be on their feet as independent women. In this regard, we will use the commemoration of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women to discuss and support women's economic independence. Our local theme for the commemoration is the empowered woman from victim to survivor. It reflects our commitment to improve support to victims of gender-based violence towards their social and economic development. Madam Speaker, we're also shining a light on domestic violence. We want to get people to talk about and take action to end the violence. We have to move the issue of domestic violence from something people say in hushed tones. We want to move it from hushed tones to the front pages. And that is why we will be moving into a phase 2 of our multimedia campaign, No Excuse for Abuse, with stronger, up-in-your-face messaging designed to get people to stop turning a blind eye to the domestic violence that they know is happening next door and to do something to end it. In this, Madam Speaker, our men are key allies, beginning with the men in this House. You must take a stand against domestic violence and abuse of our women and our children. You must intervene. You must say something. You must do something. You must do something about your friend who you know is abusing his wife or his girlfriend. It begins with us. We must set the example, and then we must go out there and say to the men in this country and the women, don't turn a blind eye. Do something about it. And as I ask the men of this House to demonstrate their commitment to ending the violence, I ask them to wear their purple button, and I'm looking around, or their purple ribbon. I'm looking around to see, to make sure that all our men, that you're wearing your purple ribbon, starting today and tomorrow, and for the 16 days of activism until December 10, as we all work together to eliminate violence against our women and our children, and to make Jamaica, this little rock, a country in which we'll all be proud to say, we're one family, we're one people, and we condemn violence against our women, against our children, and against our brothers and our sisters. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, let me thank Minister Grange for the presentation that she has made in terms of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And the minister started by speaking about the horrific murders in St. Catherine that has all of us really pained, contemplative, and really wondering who we have become as a society. Minister Grange, it was this weekend as well that of the triple murder that took place in Southwest St. Andrew, a young lady was among the victims, shot in the head. So I well understand the pain of which you speak. The truth is that it is by now very clear that we are by far too violent a society. And that, yes, as we begin or look forward to the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and begin the 16 days of activism, and as we laud the opening of the shelter and look forward to the other two coming on stream, that we have to really do much more than is currently being done. That we really have all of us to come together in a coordinated, deliberate, and sustained effort to deal with this problem that afflicts our society. And though the shelter is laudable, needed, and long awaited, and we welcome it and applaud it, I think we also have to take a step back and look, because that is at the end of the process or in the middle of the process of abuse. I think we also have to go to the beginning in terms of what are those underlying factors that are producing a society of individuals that behave like this one toward another. And I believe you spoke about the economic independence, which we have found to really be extremely important. But we know that those are not the only factors. You spoke also about beating our children and that propensity to use violence for discipline. We also have to talk about, as a society, how reluctant we are to show love to our children. Because as alarming as the statistics are, that 1 in 4 of our women face interpartner violence coming from our men, we also have to acknowledge that more than half of our families are single-parent households that are led by women. And therefore, as women, we also have to look at what we need to do differently in raising our children, raising our boys, raising our girls, to make sure we are part of the change. And I speak passionately about it because I am a mother of 4 boys. Of 4 boys. And so it is always present in my head about what our contribution can be and should be. And I echo your call to everyone, councillors, members of parliament, the faith-based community, civil society, our CB community-based organizations, everyone, to see this as a current and a real present danger. And for us to not just talk about it, but to do something about it. For us to reach our arms out to make sure that we are partnering with others so that we can reduce the propensity to violence, so that we can find other ways of disciplining our children, so we can find other ways of talking about each other and with each other. Because there is no doubt, Minister, that indeed we need to do something differently so that it can change. Minister, I want to join you in repeating the hotline numbers as well, because you and I, as members of the Gender Advisory Council, know how often in that one WhatsApp group there is an individual to say, can someone remind me of the numbers for the hotline? And that is the reason why I spoke earlier, that we have to find a way to put these hotline numbers out there so that people know them, people remember them, people know where to go to get them. Because too often in the dead of night, in the middle of the early morning, people are calling out to us and saying, can you give me the hotline number? Do you remember what the number is? And it is constantly being needed. So just for emphasis, that the hotline numbers are 876-553-0372 or 876-929-2997. Minister, I make my own personal commitment, and I know I speak on behalf of the opposition as well, in saying that we are ready to do whatever is necessary to ensure that we can reduce the culture of violence that we have, so that we can reduce the violence that is currently being perpetrated against our women and our girls. And in also doing that, we have to find a way also to lift up our men. We know that the majority of the perpetrators are our men. We know that the violence also, especially the murders and so on, again, the majority of the perpetrators are young males. And so we also have a responsibility to rescue our boys, to rescue our men, and to lift them up so that they can stand proudly as part of the Jamaican family, living together with their partners, with their mothers, with their sisters, in the way in which we would all like to see. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Member. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the House a copy of the report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motions for exemption brought on behalf of members of Parliament for St. Catherine Northwestern, St. Anne Northeastern, and St. Catherine Southeastern.
There's announcements. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following: annual report on audited financial statement of the Sports Development Foundation for the calendar year 2018. Reports of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motions for exemption brought on behalf of the members of Parliament for St. Catherine Northwestern, St. Anne Northeastern, and St. Catherine Southeastern. And the Civil Service Establishment General Amendment Order 2020 and its resolution under the Civil Service Establishment Act.
Bills brought from the Senate.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate. To the Honorable House of Representatives, I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 20th day of November 2020, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Revenue Administration Act was passed in the Senate without amendment. Signed, Thomas Tavares Finson, CDQC, JP, President of the Senate.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees.
Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the House a copy of the ethics report from the deliberations on the motions, exemptions brought on behalf of the members of Parliament for St. Catherine Northwest, St. Anne Northeast, and St. Catherine Southeast.
Notices of motions given orally.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read the first time a bill shortly entitled the Evidence Amendment Act 2020. Madam Speaker, I also beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act 2020.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read for a first time a bill shortly entitled the Representation of the People, Postponement of the Elections to the Municipal Corporations and City Municipalities Act 2020. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to introduce the bill and have it read for a first time, to move it to its second reading and to take it through all the concluding stages.
No, we won't do it in 2 weeks.
All right, fine.
So what we will do... Anyway, we'll do it next week and the following week.
Yeah.
The day. All right.
Yeah.
Because I just...
I put my people on 24/7 to get it right.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion on behalf of the Deputy Speaker. Be it resolved that the reports of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motions for exemption brought on behalf of the Members of Parliament for St. Catherine Northwestern, St. Anne Northeastern, and St. Catherine Southeastern, which was laid on the table of this House on the 24th day of November 2020, be approved. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. Madam Speaker, I beg to move and to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. Whereas Section 3.1 of the Civil Service Establishment Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the minister may, by order, constitute or abolish offices in the public service. And whereas Section 3.2 of the Act provides that on order Section 3 of the Act may from time to time, A, determine the number of any offenses specifically thereunder, B, determine the emoluments to be attached to any office, and C, make such incidental, consequential, and supplemental provisions as the minister thinks necessary or expedient to give full effect to the order. And whereas Section 3.3 of the Act provides that an order under Section 3 of the Act shall have effect from such date, not earlier than the first day of February 1976, as may be specified therein. And whereas Section 3.4 of the Act provides that an order made under Section 3 of the Act shall be subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives, and whereby the minister may make the Civil Service Establishment Act Amendment Order 2020. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as the Civil Service Establishment General Amendment Order 2020 Resolution. And 2, the Civil Service Establishment General Amendment Order 2020, which was laid on the table of the House on the 24th day of November 2020, is affirmed. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing order to enable me to take the motion. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following three motions. One, whereas subsection 1G of section 41 of the Constitution of Jamaica requires a member of this Honorable House of Representatives to vacate his seat if in any firm in which he is a partner or any company of which he is a director or a manager becomes a party to any contract with the government of Jamaica for on account of the public service, or if he becomes a partner in a firm or a director or manager of a company which is a party to any such contract. And whereas the Member of Parliament for St. Mary Southeastern is a director of Noraldo Limited, MedPro Jamaica Limited, and SuperMed Hardware, which may from time to time enter into contracts with the government of Jamaica and its affiliate agencies. And whereas the member has disclosed his interest in these entities, be it resolved that this motion be referred to the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report. Second one, Madam Speaker, whereas subsection 1G of section 41 of the Constitution of Jamaica requires a member of this Honorable House of Representatives to vacate his seat if any firm in which he is a partner or any company of which he is a director or manager becomes a party to any contract with the government of Jamaica for or on account of the public service, or if he becomes a partner in a firm or a director or manager of a company which is a party to any such contract. And whereas the Member of Parliament for St. James Southern is Managing Director of Efficient Haulage Hardware and Equipment Company Limited, a dealer in hardware and equipment rental, and Company Secretary for Pembroke Trucking Limited, a dealer in cement distribution and haulage. And whereas these entities may from time to time enter into contracts with the government of Jamaica and its affiliate agencies, and whereas the member has disclosed his interest in these entities, be it resolved that this motion be referred to the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report. A third one, Madam Speaker, whereas subsection 1G of section 41 of the Constitution of Jamaica requires a member of this Honorable House of Representatives to vacate his seat if any firm in which he is a partner or any company of which he is a director or a manager becomes a party to any contract with the government of Jamaica for or on account of the public service, or if he becomes a partner in a firm or a director or manager of a company which is a party to any such contract. And whereas the Member of Parliament for St. Elizabeth North Eastern is Company Secretary for Z Wireless Company, a dealer in cellular phones and accessories and computer-related products. And whereas this company may from time to time enter into contracts with the government of Jamaica and its affiliated agencies, and whereas the member has disclosed his interests in these entities, be it resolved that this motion be referred to the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to allow me to take these motions. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that the next meeting of the House I will move, be it resolved, with reference to the resolution approved by this Honorable House on the 29th day of September 2020, appointing a Constituency Boundaries Committee, that the name Marissa Dalrymple Filbert be added thereto. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Question and answers to questions. Member Brownberg, you had submitted a notice of motion given orally. Are you still wanting to proceed, Madam?
I do. Are we at that point, Madam Speaker?
We have long passed that point. Go ahead, member.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move, whereas the lives of most Jamaicans have been adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic through job losses, business closures, income reduction, and health challenges, and whereas the lives of many Jamaicans have also been adversely affected by the recent heavy rains and floods, which have damaged houses, roads, and infrastructure, limited transit and access to various communities, and caused severe loss to farmers, livestock owners, and fishers. And whereas all Jamaicans, not just members and supporters of political parties, should have fair access to jobs and benefits, regardless of political affiliation or non-affiliation or geographic locations. And whereas the government of Jamaica has announced a number of needed programs to mitigate these adverse conditions and losses and to assist many sectors of the society, including school, children, farmers, fishers, and other vulnerable populations, and whereas the government of Jamaica, with reduced revenue and increased demands, must ensure fairness and equity in their distribution and avoid speculation or victimization, discrimination, favoritism, nepotism, cronyism, and any hint at any issues past and present, which at various levels have dogged administrations. Be it resolved that a National Oversight Committee to monitor the distribution of state resources and benefits in a fair and equitable manner be established to ensure fairness and equity. Be it also resolved that said committee pay special attention.
Though Member Burke has not asked for the protection of the Speaker, I'm asking you to allow her to speak.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Be it also resolved that said committee pay special attention to the distribution of additional benefits under the Program of Advancement Through Health and Education, PATH, which should bear some resemblance to the National Poverty Map and the Survey of Living Conditions, the fair distribution of tablets to our school children, and enlistment for jobs in Jamaica Defence Force, the Jamaica Constabulary Force, the Jamaica Fire Brigade, the community health sector, government entities, both at the national and the local government level. Be it further resolved that in the interest of transparency, this information be made available, at least in summary, on a parish, constituency, divisional, and community basis to all elected representatives, and that the names of beneficiaries include recipients of employment shared with the Integrity Commission. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Member. Questions and answers to questions. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, please, order. Minister, order, please. Notice questions and answers to questions. We have none. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, for public business, today the motions that were given earlier on will be taken, and the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development will take the bill through its final stages. The Representation of the People's Postponement of Election to Municipal Corporation and City Municipalities Act 2020. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. Minister Mackenzie.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to introduce the bill shortly entitled Representation of the People Amendment Act 2020, to have it read a first time, and I move and ask for the second reading and to allow me to take it through all the stages, Madam Speaker.
The question is to have the bill read a second time. Those in favor? Oh, first, sorry. The question is to have the bill read for the first time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill shortly entitled The Representation of the People, Postponement of Elections to Municipal Corporations and City Municipalities Act 2020 read a first time.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are you going to ask, Minister, that the bill be read a second time? To give notice of second reading?
I beg to move that the bill be read a second time.
No. To give notice?
To give notice that the bill be read a second time.
You may proceed, Minister, with the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Nearly 4 years ago, on Monday, November 28, 2016, the people of Jamaica elected their representative to serve them at the local government level. The time is almost upon us, Madam Speaker and colleagues. In keeping with the Local Governance Act, to observe the rights of the electorate to choose the 228 councillors, including the mayor of Portmore, this administration, Madam Speaker, will respect the rule of law and ensure that these elections are held. Strictly speaking, Madam Speaker, local government election will be due on the 29th day of November, which would mark 4 years since the polls were last held. There are significant challenges in holding these elections at this time. As the country is well aware, the government is fully engaged in managing the COVID-19 pandemic, which has disrupted the economy and the social life of the society, and indeed the lives of people not just here in Jamaica, but across the world. The primary focus is still to ensure that the health and the safety protocols of the Jamaican people are protected, keeping the infection rate as low as possible. In addition to this, Madam Speaker, the government continues to respond to the effect of the adverse weather system which has been affecting the country over the last month and a half. We have seen extensive damage to our road network and to other infrastructure across the country. And to note, Madam Speaker, that some $1.5 billion in estimated damage has been done to the parochial road infrastructure and network across the country. Moreover, the Meteorological Service has advised that the forecast is for more rains, Madam Speaker, as we go past the Atlantic hurricane season, which comes to an end the end of November. It is anticipated that we might, based on the forecast, have rains early in the new year 2021. The cost of staging an election at this time is a major factor, Madam Speaker, as the government has to be responding to the needs of the country. And the reality is that the financial constraints that the country is now experiencing because of COVID-19 and the persistent rains, Madam Speaker, this administration is one that consistently listens to the people as we work in the service of the people of Jamaica. The general sentiments is that having the general elections in September 3rd, 82 days ago, our citizens, Madam Speaker, wants us now to focus on the recovery from COVID-19 and the damage caused by rain so that they can return to a path of prosperity. The 8th schedule of the Local Governance Act provides a period of extension, Madam Speaker, which is 90 days commencing on the day after the 4th anniversary of the date on which the most recent election was held. This allows for the next local government elections to be held no later, and I want to again repeat, no later than February 27, 2021. It is clear, however, that a greater period of time is needed for this recovery process. Accordingly, the Representation of the People's Act is being temporarily amended to facilitate the holding of the next local government elections on a date no later than February 27, 2022. As the Minister responsible for local government and a member of a government led by the Most Honorable Prime Minister Andrew Holness, I wish to assure this Honorable House and the country of the commitment of this government in having the next local government elections, the 13th since independence, within the amended time frame as just given here, Madam Speaker. This bill entitled an act to temporarily modify the Representation of the People's Act in order to postpone the holding of the general elections of members to serve on the respective councils of the municipal corporation and the general election of mayors for the city municipalities. The short title of the bill is contained in Section 1. Section 2 of this bill becomes a substitute for paragraph 4 of the 8th schedule of the Representation of the People's Act. Section 2 also amends paragraph 4, subparagraph 7, by changing the end of the relevant period of extension from February 27, 2021 to February 27, 2022. Critical section also clearly states that this bill will remain in force until the next day, February 28, and then expire. Madam Speaker, I take this opportunity in commending this bill to the Honourable House and ask for consideration and approval. Madam Speaker, I beg that the bill be read a second time.
Opposition Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my understanding is that it is the intention of the Minister to take this bill through all its stages today, and presumably it will go to the Senate later this week. So we're seeing this for the first time. We did get notice that there was an intention to bring the bill today, but we're seeing the bill for the first time now. Madam Speaker, we fully understand the exigencies that are behind this decision to amend the law to extend the period within which the local government elections must be held. We know that we're going through a very difficult time in managing the pandemic. We have the Christmas period coming up, which is going to create additional challenges, and I know the Prime Minister plans to speak to that later today, I believe. And we know that the recent rains, which are ongoing, have caused substantial damage to the country's road network and infrastructure. And therefore, there's a cost factor at play because holding elections does cost quite a bit of money. So as the Memorandum of Objects and Reasons states, the postponement is necessary due to the impact of the coronavirus on the Jamaican society and economy, increased risk of exposure by the electorate to the virus, and the current financial constraints, coupled with increased demand for resources to respond to the recent flood rains. And we know that Jamaica has seen a significant increase in the number of cases and indeed the number of deaths after the campaign leading up to the general election, which itself took place at a time when we were seeing a spike. So we, on our part, understand that we don't want to have that again so soon or at all, and that we need to defer this because it's in the best interests of the public that we not have another election campaign while the pandemic is still raging, so to speak. So, Minister, I support that objective and understand it. While I'm on the topic of the coronavirus, I just want to reiterate to Minister Tufton that I urge him to reconstitute the committee, the parliamentary committee that was looking at the public health dimensions of dealing with the pandemic. We had some useful meetings. It was an opportunity for us to get important data around the problem and to suggest solutions and try to be constructive in the national effort. And it was interrupted because of the dissolution of Parliament and so on. But it has not been reconstituted. And I would urge you to reconstitute that committee so that the opposition can play a constructive part in designing and facilitating the solutions that you're tasked with trying to find for managing this problem. And it was always a constructive process, so I think it's not something that should be feared. I know it takes a little time, but it is important, I think, to have a bipartisan approach to the public health strategy, with, of course, the government leading the way. Minister, on the specific mechanism in the bill, I must say I do have a concern. The design of the Local Governance Act and its amendment to the Representation of the Peoples Act was to establish a fixed cycle of 3 months after the 4th anniversary of every local government. And this was designed to do two things. First of all, to ensure that past practices, which we all know about, spanning administrations, of tending to defer the holding of local government elections, that would no longer be a feature. And our local government system would know that just like general elections have a fixed election cycle, so would local government elections, and it couldn't just be modified by a motion or some legislative instrument coming to the House. So that was one thing it did. Secondly, it ensured that the period within which the election was heard was a finite period of 90 days after the 4th anniversary, which allowed practitioners to prepare accordingly, and there was a certain certainty that that brought to the process. What I would have liked to have seen, Minister, is in deferring the process, instead of deferring it in a way where the period in which it must be held is now a 1-year period, a 12-month period, that begins on the 27th of February 2021. We would have instead kept a 3-month window, but say that that 3-month window must be within the 1-year period that starts February 27th, 2021, and that the specific 3-month period would be designated by the minister by, say, 90 days notice by an order brought to the House that would then say the 3-month period will begin on such and such a date, 90 days hence. And that would restore some certainty that there is a 3-month window within which it must be called, and would allow the flexibility that the minister would be able to determine that based on the public health and financial issues as they play out, because we do not know yet exactly how they will play out. So that flexibility would be retained. What I don't like about the idea of just extending a 1-year period is that it creates significant uncertainty as to when it will actually be held during that period. And I would have preferred to have kept the 3-month window with a mechanism that would allow the minister to designate by order when that 3-month period begins, giving reasonable notice for doing so, say 90 days, and that then would allow you the flexibility to designate it within the 1-year cycle of which we speak. I would have preferred that, Minister, to opening it up for a 1 year with significant uncertainty as to when it will be. And we don't want to be in a situation where there's a snap election called or something of that nature, because that would be inconsistent with the way in which the local government system has been developed and was passed with bipartisan support in the 3 strategic laws that were passed back in 2015 or 14. I can't remember exactly what year it was. So, Minister, you have our support for the extension. I would have preferred the mechanism not to depart so significantly from what is already in the law, but simply defer that 3-month window for any period within the next 12 months, beginning February 27th, 2021, and allowing the minister to designate by order when the 3-month period begins, which you could then do when you take into account what the Minister of Health is saying, what the Minister of Finance is saying as to when it is safe to conduct these elections. And that would at least ensure that there was some certainty as to when the election would be held, with reasonable notice as to when the period would start. Up to now, we've had certainty of a fixed period, which we knew was to begin on the 29th of November. We're giving that up because of the problems we face, which we fully understand, but we're giving it up in a way which creates significant additional uncertainty as to when it will be called during the 12-month period, and we're not so comfortable with that. As I said, we haven't had a chance to caucus and discuss this because it was just tabled now, and we're just seeing it for the first time. And we're trying to cooperate with the effort to deal with this now, because I understand you'd want to have this resolved before the 90-day window begins. So I understand that, Minister, but those are my thoughts on the mechanism that's in here. I would have preferred if we could have done it so as to reserve a 3-month window, but allow that window to be designated within the 12-month cycle that you're creating here. And it would create some additional certainty, at least at that point in time, that we can't just have something thrown on us, as it were, at any time during 12 months, but rather the minister would decide when the 3-month window should begin, and it would be a period within the 12 months that is mentioned here. Those are my thoughts, Minister. Otherwise, we support the bill in its concept and the rationale for it. Thank you.
Yeah. Madam Speaker, through you to the Minister. The Leader of Opposition has clearly outlined the major problems, the major considerations. I would just want to raise two other concerns that I have, which is, I know that the Prime Minister long ago said we have to learn to live with COVID. And so every time we make some arrangement that postpones what we need to do and so on, I always look at it to take a second look. Although the reasons given are understandable, and I'm not saying nay. During this period, Minister, it means that there are a number of councillors who have already made up their minds that they are not going to face an election as councillor. And what that means is that the longer the period of the that is being asked for, the longer the longer the potential absence of a real representation in many divisions. And I am concerned about our communities not having the full representation, because a council was expecting that by the latest February 2021 they would have departed, is still hanging on and waiting on that. So I just wanted to just kind of... Huh? Yes, and the fact that I think as we speak, there's at least one vacancy that currently exists. So I just wanted to raise that. And then 1 year plus of a heightened campaign for the local government elections also is something that concerns me, especially, again, as you have said, given the COVID constraints that exist.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me thank the members for their contribution. I've taken note of the proposal that was recommended by the member from Southwest. But in all that the member have said, it doesn't necessarily mean that that 3-month window does not exist. What would have happened is that if we didn't act now, then the councils would automatically dissolve itself, and there would be no means of administration. You know, we'd have to validate whatever has taken place. We hear you, member, and we will, you know, it is something that we have discussed at the level of the cabinet with the support of the Attorney General, and we believe that this opportunity that has been presented, and if the fear of us abusing that opportunity, I'm giving the Honourable House the assurance that that will not be done. It doesn't necessarily mean that the holding of the elections will come 1 year from now. It can happen any time within the period. So the member from Southwest raised a question about living with COVID and the uncertainties of COVID, and mentioned the fact that there are areas without representation. I would not go there. I would not want to respond to that, knowing the history. Right? COVID has brought many challenges, members. And I would urge the Parliament to recognize and appreciate the challenges that we face, because next year when we get into the new financial year, challenges are going to be great. So whenever there is a genuine opportunity for us to hold these elections for the benefit of the people, we will do so, and we will not abuse the privilege that we now enjoy in calling these elections. So I hear you, member, and we are grateful for the support and the comments from that side. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
No,
Minister?
Madam Speaker, just for a matter of clarification, clarity. No, I had asked the minister for consideration of those seats without councillors or without representation, which he said he did not want to go there. Minister, honestly, I raised the matter simply out of concern. I know that there are at least 2 seats without councillors because the councillors have died. I know that there are at least 2 members in the parliament who are also councillors and therefore are going to have to carry both. And I would not want you, Minister, to suggest for half a minute that the concern I raised was frivolous. And so I just wanted to just kind of put that there.
Member, it is not. And as you are aware, that in the absence of unelected representatives at the level of the municipal corporations, that the mayor or the chairman of the council assumes that responsibility. So, and I can say to you that I have been keeping a close check to ensure that there is no abuse of those vacancies that have been created. With that in mind, I beg, Madam Speaker, that the bill be read a second time.
The question is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Temporarily Modify the Representation of the People Act in order to postpone the holding of a general election of members to serve on the respective councils of municipal corporations and a general election of the mayors of city municipalities read a second time.
The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill clause by clause. I put clause 1. Anybody looking at the bill? Member Jackson. You try the other one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Madam Speaker, I just want to use the opportunity to get a clarification from the minister. My understanding is that in the legislation, it is only in the KCC that a councillor can sit in both that chamber and the parliament simultaneously. Can you say if that carry over to other municipalities?
Remember, the old parish council and KCC Act was repealed, and the new Local Governance Act replaces that. So there can be no sitting. All the councillors who were elected as councillors prior to the September elections have resigned as councillors, so they are no longer sitting councillors, and it has been recorded that they have all resigned.
Thanks. No, that's what I just wanted the clarification. Thanks, Minister.
So I'll repeat, I put clause 1. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. I put clause 2. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. So I'm not read this a second. All right, our maize is back. We are back in the House. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister?
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the bill be read a third time.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Temporarily Modify the Representation of the People Act in order to postpone the holding of a general election of members to serve on the respective councils of municipal corporations and a general election of the mayors of city municipalities read a third time and passed.
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move for a recommittal of the item statement by ministers in order to allow the Most Honorable Prime Minister to make his statement.
Prime Minister. Oh, sorry. Yes. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, I wanted to copies will be on this. I wanted to update Parliament on the proposed measures for December 2020 prior to the enactment of the new orders under the Disaster Risk Management Act. We must take measures now to continue our measured, evidence-based, proportionate, and situationally appropriate risk-based management approach to the pandemic. We are now approaching another period of high risk for us as a nation in the pandemic. This is a period of time when we will be seeing higher levels of travel, both internally and from overseas. It is a period of time when Jamaicans are looking forward to the traditional merriment that is associated with the Christmas season. Those factors contribute to this period being a higher risk period than normal. It is a difficult balance to fulfill the expectations of the season, anticipated increase in commercial activity, while at the same time keeping the population safe and not overwhelm our health system. We must remain diligent in our adherence to the infection prevention and control measures and not jeopardize our recovery prospects in 2021. Our measures for the month of December must therefore be realistic, but they must also be strategic. After consultations with a number of stakeholders, which I will enumerate, we had consultations with the church group, the umbrella body. We had consultation with a broad cross-section of private sector interests, and I had a one-on-one conversation with the leader of the opposition on a call, discussing what we could do for the Christmas period. I'm not saying, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there is consensus or agreement, but I will say that there is understanding of the issues. So after consultation with a number of stakeholders, Cabinet is considering the following measures for December 2020 to mid-January 2021. I bring these to this Honourable House today in the usual spirit, where though these measures could easily be announced outside of this body as part of the Disaster Risk Management Act, I've always maintained that the spirit of the legislation and the way in which we conduct our government is that when we are taking such measures that will infringe upon the constitutional rights of the citizen, that they should be brought to Parliament for parliamentarians to have a discussion on it and to make their contributions. And I think that that has been the spirit that we have proceeded so far with, and it has worked very well in ensuring that there is, well, maybe not necessarily national consensus, but certainly there is cooperation amongst the stakeholders. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, the gathering limit is proposed to remain at 15, and the prohibition on parties and events will remain in place. That's what we are proposing for the Christmas period. So the Christmas period, the December, so for the Christmas period, that is for the month of December through to mid-January, the gathering limit will remain in place at 15 persons, and the prohibition for parties and events and such like will remain in place. However, we are proposing that under the Disaster Risk Management Act, we will make an amendment to say that all gatherings, whether in public or private places, should be no more than 15 persons. It's a very important distinction. In the current order, it speaks to public places. But for the Christmas period, where we are anticipating that there will likely be gatherings not only in public but in private places as well, we may very well have to make this adjustment for that period. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are seeing, being reported now by the CDC, by the World Health Organization, by PAHO, that many of the super spread events are actually private events. There is one case that I was reviewing last night where the CDC pointed out that a wedding in the United States, a wedding of 50 persons, contributed to a spread of over 300, and including the deaths of persons who didn't even attend the wedding, but of course secondary transmission. So weddings, parties, funerals, receptions, these are now emerging as the spreading events, and we have to be very careful. And we are seeing what has happened in other jurisdictions as a result of Thanksgiving activities, where families are gathered together, and then of course the virus is spread through those gatherings. So we have to just be very cautious and very careful. Of course, this could be thorny and problematic in how it is enforced, but I think we should still propose to make this amendment, and we will also be clear with the security forces, the law enforcement, to ensure that when it is actually being enforced, it is done in a way that is, of course, sensitive to people's privacy and their property rights. Madam Speaker, I'm appealing to all Jamaicans to be responsible in the way we celebrate Christmas this year. It should not be about large gatherings of family and friends, but rather we should celebrate with our immediate family, with our immediate household, and try to maintain 15 or less. However, we understand that in Jamaica, the lines of household and family is blurred. Some households have 20 persons. I can think in my constituency right now that if you were to enter one yard, as Minister Samuda refers to them as big yards. You would have sometimes even more than 100 persons there. I'm certain that the leader of opposition business can relate to that. I'm certain the leader of the opposition can relate to that. So even though we are proposing to make the amendment, we understand the exigencies of the Jamaican reality. But this does not say that we shouldn't do it to send a message to the population that we have to control and limit our gatherings. I think that is the essence of us proposing to make this amendment to the new order that will come into effect in December. I must also make, Madam Deputy Speaker, a special appeal to the diaspora. I know, as is customary, you may want to come home for Christmas. And, there are some friends and family members that I haven't seen in a while. I've saw a little note that says, "Cuz, tell me, what are the protocols for family members coming home?" I haven't responded to them yet. But buy a tablet. And that's a good idea. Instead of coming, buy a tablet and send it. Send it for the kids here so that they can go back to school. But I'm not here saying don't come. I'm saying if you don't need to travel to come for Christmas, then, reconsider. If you are deciding to come, then go to the resilient corridor and help our tourism industry. But don't leave the resilient corridor to come and look for grandma and auntie. Maintain the protocols. And if you come, there is a strict quarantine protocol in place under the Disaster Risk Management Act for 14 days. Of course, the way in which it is crafted, if you come for 5 days, you can leave. But you must stay in quarantine. And that fits neatly into the concept that we are pushing for the celebration of Christmas. Celebrate Christmas within your household. So you might very well, if you come, quarantine and celebrate the Christmas inside your household. I can only make the appeal because what we wouldn't want to happen is that after you have come, you unintentionally, and I'm certain that's not your intention, but you may have hastened the departure of your grandmother or your grandfather or some other member of your family who is in the vulnerable group. So I can only bring this to the national forum, bring it to public consideration, and make an appeal that if you don't have to travel, then don't travel at this period of time. But if you do decide to come, we will still welcome you, not necessarily with an embrace, but we will welcome you socially distant with an elbow or a namaste. And we expect that you will maintain the quarantine, stay and celebrate within your household grouping, and enjoy the season and preserve the lives of our loved ones. Madam Speaker, I have received, Madam Deputy Speaker, Madam Speaker, I have received numerous heart-rending appeals in respect of funeral services. The prohibition on funeral services has had a very significant psychological, emotional, and spiritual impact on those who have lost loved ones. The inability to have a proper funeral service on the passing of their loved ones makes it more difficult to get closure. The government has taken note of this, and we are examining the possibility of allowing funeral services with specific restrictive protocols. Now, I don't want this to be interpreted as a change in the protocol. The protocol as is still stands. Funeral services are prohibited, but we have been in discussion with the churches, and, for example, I received one very touching letter from a family whose family member passed, and that family member was the founder of the church. And because of the prohibition, they were not able to have the family member who dedicated his entire life to building this church, to have the final rites administered in the church that he worked so hard. And it really had an impact on the family, and I sympathize with them, but I couldn't do anything. I couldn't make any exceptions. But it is something that we have to think about very carefully in trying to achieve that delicate balance in the society. So we are examining it, and hopefully next year we will come to Parliament again with a proposal. We can have it discussed and see what can be done. Madam Speaker, I now turn to the proposed curfew hours. Balancing all the different expectations and considerations has been a challenge. I know that some persons fearing the spread of the virus are saying we should have a tighter curfew. Other persons concerned about the state of the economy are advocating for longer hours. The government has tried to strike a balance which allows for greater productive economic activity while limiting activities that are likely to result in greater spread. The proposed curfew hours will be as follows. For the month of December, with exceptions for the public holidays, the curfew will commence at 10 p.m. nightly and end at 5 a.m. each morning. On Christmas Day and Boxing Day, the curfew will commence at 7 p.m. and end at 5 a.m. the following morning. Movement will therefore only be permitted between 5 a.m. and 7 p.m. on Christmas Day and Boxing Day. On December 27th, therefore, the curfew hour will revert to 10 p.m. nightly, including December 31st, 2020, which is New Year's Eve. On New Year's Day, January 1st, 2021, the curfew will commence at 7 p.m. and end at 5 a.m. the following morning. From January 2 to the 15th of January 2021, we will return to the 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew. However, if the numbers rise beyond reasonable expectations, then the government will have to reevaluate these hours. Keeping the curfew at 10 p.m. will depend on how well all of us take personal responsibility in observing the protocols. Madam Speaker, let me just say a few more words in explaining the curfews and the logic behind it. When we met with the private sector interests, they made valid points that a 1 hour increase in the movement hours, that is a 1 hour decrease in the curfew hours, would have a significant positive impact on commerce. It will increase economic activity, and it will bring back many jobs which are now on the margin. For example, the quick service industry. 1 hour more for serving persons in the fast food industry, for restaurants, for pharmacies. That will bring back shift employment. So that 1 more hour makes a shift more viable. And that means more people get paid for Christmas. People can actually have their Christmas dinner, and overall general positive impact. But it is not long enough for persons to want to keep party events, even though they are banned, because you now have a general curfew ending at 10. So it is, I believe we have struck the right balance to increase productivity, but not at the same time encourage risky activities that could increase the spread. And that's where we believe we have struck a balance. And we understand this is not going to make everyone happy. There are those who believe that for Christmas we should have gone to midnight. And there are others who are deathly afraid of what could happen and believe that chaos will ensue and that what we should really do is make the curfew tighter in Christmas. But I believe we have struck a balance. Now, what is the logic for Christmas Day, for Boxing Day and New Year's Day? Those are the days when persons would be moving not necessarily for economic activity, but for social, recreational, and family activities. And that, I believe, would be the root of the spread. And you would have heard our CMO pointing out that we are seeing an uptick, though slight so far, but after the Christmas period, you could see, it is being projected, that our numbers will rise. And it would be those days that would account for or significantly contribute to. So from a risk management point of view, we have decreased the curfew hours rather, for the entire month of December, except for the public holidays, where we tighten. Now, normally when we tighten on public holidays, we close at 3. Someone was pointing out to me that the vendors downtown were saying, 3 o'clock not going to work, Prime Minister. I didn't get to see that video, but I'm going to search for it. And they have a point. What we wouldn't want to do is set an unrealistic curfew time that would force people to break the law. So I think the curfew times that have been set would still facilitate grand market activities. Well, no, grand market would be 10 because it would be Christmas Eve. And we consider that carefully because that is the commercial day that is beneficial to the average man. In my constituency, for example, we don't want to force people to break the law. So I think 10 p.m. is a fairly good compromise. I'll appeal to all the persons who are selling in where we have the big grand markets that happen in Trelawney, in the Falmouth Market, downtown, in Spanish Town, in Halfway Tree, all of that area turns out to be a big grand market.
Every parish capital.
And I'm not forgetting Christiana, a member from Northeast Manchester. Gail has a market, and it can be grand, I get it. But almost every rural parish, everywhere, people will be out. And I take the opportunity, Madam Speaker, to appeal to all the shoppers and all the persons who will be selling their wares that wear your mask.
Yes.
Pay attention to your hand hygiene and your facial hygiene. Hand hygiene, sanitize your hands regularly. Facial hygiene, wear your mask covering your nose and mouth. Right? Or a face shield if you can. Social distance, that might be difficult, but I would say to you, if you are going to the market, you can choose your own space. Somebody comes close to you, you step back. Maneuver yourself smartly so that you avoid any clustering or crowding. And just shop very smartly. Make your list before. Go and get exactly what you need. The browsing and window shopping, you can eliminate that and just go for exactly what you want. These are smart things that you can do to keep yourself safe in this time. On New Year's Eve, that one gave us quite a bit of mental exercise as to how we're going to treat with the traditions of the season, the watch night service. And when I discussed it with the church members, there were two sets of suggestions. The one set is that we should have no curfew on New Year's Eve, which means that you could go up to midnight, and then you could give 1 hour and 30 minutes to allow people to leave church and get home. So the curfew would be effectively at 1:30. That was the suggestion. The problem that we have is that once you do that, then you have people starting to have later gatherings, the illegal parties and the illegal receptions and, the prohibited rather than illegal activities. Those will masquerade under what we were intending to give the approvals for, which would be for the traditional watch night service. And it becomes a law enforcement nightmare. And so we decided not to go with that route. There was another view which suggested that we should treat New Year's Eve in the same way we treat Boxing Day and Christmas Day, and start the curfew at 7 p.m. We decided to go to 10. It is a commercial day, and it's not a public holiday in a sense. So we decided to go to 10. When we examine it further, we could go to 7, but at this point the proposal is to go to 10. Next week we will bring to the Parliament the actual order, but the thinking now is to end at 10. On New Year's Day itself, we will end at 7. That is the 1st of January. The curfew will start at 7 p.m. What we would like to do is for the beginning of the first half of January is to maintain the 10 p.m. curfew start to give more time for economic activity. However, that all depends on the numbers we are seeing coming out of December. There are some critical trade-offs that we don't want to have to make. If December goes badly in terms of numbers, we cannot reopen schools. And that's the trade-off. So each time we give a little, we end up, disadvantaging our students by not being able to reopen our schools. And that is a trade-off that we all must bear in mind. And the other disadvantage, of course, is that if we don't maintain the protocols and we see where this becomes a threat, then we will have to even put in place even tighter curfew measures and tighter infection control measures, which could have even greater negative economic impact. So it really comes down to personal responsibility and how well, we as individuals, how well we are faithful and how well we adhere to the protocols that we have put out. So, Madam Speaker, these are not normal times, and we will not be able to celebrate Christmas in the normal way this year. Celebrating Christmas in the normal way could mean that we would have to keep our schools closed or shut down our economy even more than it is now restricted. We must continue to be vigilant and responsible over the next few months, starting with the upcoming Christmas season. Madam Speaker, Christmas is my favorite time of the year. And I definitely will miss celebrating Christmas in the normal way. And I'm certain that that is the sentiment of all Jamaicans. But we have to be responsible. We are seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. A vaccine is likely to be available very soon, from what we are hearing, encouraging news with several of the trials. let us not at this time throw away good sense. Let us not at this time fall into complacency. Let us, Madam Speaker, as a nation, take the true meaning of the season, which is a time for peaceful reflection on the birth of Christ and his redemption of the world. Let us do this with our families together, as Mary and Joseph did with the Holy Family. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker. Dealing with the regulation of behavior going into the Christmas season is a difficult task because there are competing interests, all of which are worthy interests. The economy, we know, is struggling. We know that for many merchants, Christmas is an important part of their annual sales. And for employees, it's an opportunity for them often to get additional work. On the other hand, we are in a situation from a public health perspective which remains precarious, and we know that it is likely to be endangered by the influx of persons coming home from countries where the pandemic has really spiked in a second or third wave, and indeed from our own culture of celebration of Christmas, the partying, and the way in which we manifest spirited entertainment in our country. I don't have any specific criticisms of the regime outlined here. It represents an attempt to find a balance. Whether it's the right balance or not remains to be seen. I think it has to be kept scrupulously under review as we go through December and watch the numbers and the data coming out. And I noticed that the Prime Minister has indicated that that is the intention. And when we had our consultation, I had suggested that that would be a prudent approach. The issue of funerals, Prime Minister, I know is a very serious one for many families and indeed for the clergy in the country. And I think that there needs to be some consultation with them around what the protocols should be that would enable some kind of service which would not be high-risk activity rather than a complete ban on funerals. And I look forward to that being fast-tracked because I do think that is a culturally very taxing and emotionally difficult aspect of the protocols that we have. Prime Minister, I must tell you that the projected influx of many thousands of Jamaicans coming from the United States, the UK, and so on for Christmas into homes in Jamaica from countries where they're going through lockdown now or they're seeing very high levels of infection and spread is a frightening prospect for many Jamaicans. And I really would urge personal responsibility and strong public relations, PR, around encouraging visitors to respect the protocols and respect the social distancing norms that are embodied in the disaster risk management orders, the quarantine periods, and so on. I think that if we effectively communicate the importance of this, it will modify behavior. And in a sense, persons are privileged by being able to come home at this time in an unrestricted way, other than the protocols that they're expected to comply with when they're here. And I think that we must expect of them a high standard of behavior that doesn't imperil their family and friends while they're here. And indeed, for all Jamaicans at this time, as we go into the season, I would join in the exhortation that they adopt a particularly responsible approach to the Christmas celebrations, the wearing of masks, the keeping of reasonable distances, hand hygiene, washing, and so on, so as to minimize the impact on the health system and on people's lives that inappropriate, indisciplined behavior will occasion. So, and others may have contributions to make, but from my perspective, the government has considered the matter, they have consulted, they've struck a balance on this. Whether it's the right balance or not, we'll see. But from where I sit, it seems to be a reasonable balance, and I would not object to any of the specific parameters in the proposals here. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, you hinted on some specific measures that have been contemplated for some time now. The fact is that from September there was a talk of some penalties for breaking of these protocols, especially mask wearing, social distancing, and the holding of these events, the parties. There was a proposal on the table, Prime Minister, as was said to the country, that there was the contemplation to have a ticketing system. I'd like to know, where are we with that now? And from September, we have been talking about that. This is 2 months down the road. It would be prudent for the country to know where we are with that. You mentioned the expectations of people in terms of a moral suasion, but also an expectation from them to adhere to the protocols, the wearing of the mask, the social distancing, preventing the big gatherings at the houses, and both in the private and public sector. The challenge I have, though, Prime Minister, with that, and there has been a talk, you did mention it just now, and the CMO mentioned it a couple of days ago, that there is, as a result of Christmas, there is an anticipated increase of the numbers come next year, come January, come later on December into January. The question I want to know, Prime Minister, is that even though with the addition of the COVID beds in the hospitals, with the addition of the field hospital and hospitals to come, have we made provisions for the anticipated increase or even suspected or whatever increase that we may have by the numbers of health personnel we have out there, having regard to the fact that we are almost at a burnout now of many of these health providers? And if we are going to be, as was said publicly, that we expect an increase, is the system prepared to be able to cope and to deal with this? Because even though the numbers will increase or may increase, concomitantly you'll have an increase in the numbers of persons who are admitted to hospitals. So just want to know that we are prepared to deal with what is happening here. As the leader of the opposition, I said, Prime Minister, the balancing of the hours is something that is accommodated on this side in terms of support. And the challenge that always obtains in having these curfew hours is sometimes is not even the number of hours, but the ability to police these extended periods. And I don't necessarily mean Jamaica Constabulary Force, but policing in the sense that the longer you open the establishments, that there's less likelihood of people to be abusing the protocols during these extended hours. So that is something that has to be borne in mind. And if it means, as you did indicate a while ago, that the police, the constabulary force is under pressure or would be under pressure to monitor all of this, is something that has to be taken into account to ensure that we keep the numbers down. Thank you.
Prime Minister, you mentioned a light at the end of the tunnel. as a light at the end of the tunnel, being the vaccine that is coming. I just wonder, is it too early to ask whether the planning has already begun, or where in the planning process are we in terms of the plan for distribution of this vaccine? And if not, when might you be able to, either you or the Minister of Health might be able to update the country through the Parliament on these plans?
Thank you, members. As just to repeat that, when it comes on to the specific health questions, I will defer to the Minister of Health. I could answer you generally on some questions. As it relates to the ticketing system and the revision of the penalties, that work continues between the Ministry of Local Government, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Justice. I believe that the ticketing system should be ready shortly to go before LegCom, and I believe the other measures for the change in penalties as well should be almost ready. As you would know, certainly our new leader of the opposition would know that these legislative processes take some time, and they are in process, and I'm assured that the Minister of Justice is leading the charge on getting them done. The question regarding are we prepared for the expected increase in numbers? The answer is yes, we are prepared. But I think the deeper question that you would want to ask would be, are our preparations sufficient? That really depends on the numbers that happen. And that is why, aside from preparing beds and medical personnel, which we have not yet put to the country the financial cost, because to fight the pandemic, we can't say we are at our budget's limit and therefore we can't do. We keep spending on ensuring that we have enough medical personnel, that we have enough public health personnel, that we have supplies, that we have beds. You know, we keep pushing our fiscal limit to ensure that we can have a proper public health response. But you will recognize, member, that the best strategy is to prevent or temper the increase as much as possible, to attenuate any geometric spread that might happen. And the curfew measures that we have announced, it is designed just to do that. The gathering restriction, which we have expanded or proposed to expand, it is designed to prevent those numbers from reaching the levels where it will challenge the preparations we have made. And so I want to assure you that we have made preparations. But there is another factor, member, which as a medical professional yourself you will appreciate, that the resources that we have set aside for COVID patients, those resources are also demanded by patients who are exhibiting flu-like symptoms or who have contracted the flu or dengue or any other illness for that matter. So those beds are being competed for. We are now in the flu season, so there would be an increase in the number of persons being so affected. And we can't have a bed and say, well, this bed is just for COVID, and someone who is ill otherwise can't get the bed. So these are all factors that we have to consider. So though we have made the preparations, we are also going through the flu season, which would have been exacerbated by the rains that we have had. We have had some terrible accidents before. We are still having people being shot and injured. So all of these are, and we still have dengue. Thank God we have that under general control. But those resources are being competed for. And so if there is an increase, I wouldn't be able to say, if there's an increase beyond what we expect, certainly our resources would be challenged. As it relates to vaccination, member from Western St. Andrew, you wanted to I'll allow the minister to speak on the vaccine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Prime Minister. On the vaccination arrangements, we have already put in place, as you know, the subscribe to the group funding in order to secure a percentage of the vaccines that come on the market through PAHO WHO. So we're entitled, based on what we have advanced, to 10% of our population. That's the pool scheme that we have subscribed to. So we are therefore going to be entitled to a certain number of dosage. The next phase, and more direct to your question, is the coordination of distribution. In another week or two, and the Prime Minister isn't aware because I only discussed it today, we'll be announcing a national COVID vaccine coordinating committee, which will involve members of different stakeholder groups to coordinate or begin to put in place the plans for distributing of the vaccine once it is available.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, members. I believe we have answered the questions. I thank the members for your patience and indulgence in the presentation.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I beg for recommittal of the item public business in order to complete the matters that are outstanding. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Public business, you can go ahead. We don't need to recommit. Go ahead.
I did ask for a recommittal for statement by ministers in order to allow. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Once it is finished, we automatically.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that the next
suspension.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier, with respect to the amendment of the Boundaries Committee to add the name Marissa Dalrymple Philibert.
The question before the House is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the minister to take the motions, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Members, you have to listen and contribute, so that you know what you're saying. Aye to.
Madam Speaker, I now move that the motion, notice of which I gave earlier, be approved.
Members of the House, those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the three motions, notice of which I gave earlier, with regards to the exemption of members of this Honourable House, the Honourable Dr. Norman Dunn, Honourable Omar Davis, and the Honourable Delroy Slowly.
Members, the question is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the minister to take the three motions, notice of which he gave earlier. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the motions, notice of which I gave earlier, to be approved.
Members, the question is that the motions, notice of which was given earlier, be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing order to enable me to take the motion, notice of which was given by the House Leader on my behalf. The question.
Members, those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now move that the motion, notice of which was given earlier, be approved.
Members, the question is that the motion, notice of which was given earlier, be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, just a reminder to the Honourable House that the Youth Parliament is scheduled to meet at the William Gordon House, and as usual on Monday of next week, and we are inviting and urging members to support as much as possible these young people who will be participating in that youth parliament, taking their roles in relation to ministers of different portfolio areas, as well as members from different constituencies. This has become a tradition, Madam Speaker, and it's a good way to ingratiate the young into the appreciation of the parliamentary democracy, and particularly the Westminster system as we have it, and indeed the adversarial democracy that has become such an important part of our tradition over time. Madam Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business today. I consequently invite you to adjourn the House until December 1 at 2 p.m. when we will revert, this time, in fact, to the William Gordon House. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the House be adjourned until next Tuesday, the 1st of December, 2020. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This Honourable House is now adjourned.